Learn to live with your spirituality, not for it. And that piece of advice is what made me sit back and reevaluate everything.
Welcome to the Pagan Temple. I'm your host, Matt, and there are voices in this community that don't often get heard. This is where we can change that, one conversation at a time. All right, so we have with us Einar Blackthorn of the Common Hearth Community. He's a Norse pagan, and we're just going to ask him a few questions. We're going to get to know him and get into this. So, if you would, just tell us a little bit about yourself and how you found Norse paganism.
What's going on, everybody? Like Matt introduced me as, I'm Einar. I'm the founder of the Common Hearth, and I've been a pagan since 2015. And coming up as a kid in a predominantly Irish Catholic neighborhood, I wasn't exactly exposed to Judaism, the religion of my family. I was spiritually Jewish. I am ethnically Jewish. And in that quest for me to ingratiate myself and make friends, my parents enrolled me in a CYO as a kid. And a CYO, if you don't know, is a church youth organization. And I kind of had a really hardcore negative exposure to religion as a result of being in that CYO. Every day, the group would meet and they would recite the Lord's Prayer. It wasn't my religion at the time, so I bowed my head and I just stayed silent, and respectfully so. And one of the priests came up and said, "Why aren't you praying?" And I said, "Sir, I'm Jewish. This isn't my religion." The priest looked at me like almost as though I was disgusting.
Oh, wow.
And he had said to me something to the effect of, "This is the Lord's house, kid. Jewish or not, you need to pray."
Oh, wow.
So that was like my first little into having negative exposure to religion.
Oh, yeah, I can definitely understand that.
And in 2015, I had an experience that essentially defied all semblance of conventional logic and conventional wisdom. And I thought I was on a one-way trip to shack up in the wacko basket.
Oh, wow.
And I live in New York City. Construction is going on constantly. Walking under scaffolds is basically a way of life here.
Oh, for sure.
And I'm walking under a scaffold. Something falls off the building and hits the roof of that scaffold. And instead of scattering, crows dropped down and straight at me. And now I know that this was a deeply spiritual experience. If you were across the street, you would have seen me in 2015 screaming and falling, "Oh my god, oh, get him off me, get him off me, get off me!"
Oh, for sure.
And when the crows parted, there was an old man standing in front of me. And he basically had the appearance of the sweetest grandfather you could ever meet in your life.
Oh.
The one to give you $5 at a shitty Werther's original every time he met you.
Yeah.
But what made it different, I felt power coming off of him. I felt this sense of awe being in his presence. And what I can remember of his face, he had a cataract in his left eye. His left eye was completely milky white. No semblance of an iris, no semblance of a pupil. Straight milk white.
Wanderer.
And the lens of his glasses was also punched out. And he just looked me dead in the face and said, "Don't be afraid." And by the time I said I wasn't, I had no idea that I had moved about 500 feet out from underneath that scaffold, and when I turned around, no old man, no birds.
Powerful experience.
It definitely was. I kind of just sat there I sat on it for like a week, because I was that guy who used to make fun of Christians who saw Jesus in their breakfast toast.
Yeah. Same.
And I was like, oh my God, I'm turning into a stereotype. Oh God. But I said, wait, I might be going crazy too. So I took myself to a neurologist, clean bill of health. Went to a therapist. You're just stressed. So just like, oh, okay, cool. This is phenomenal. So, about 4 months after the therapist visit, I get shingles in my left eye. Bad enough to the point I have to wear an eye patch. And the only thing I could really do was just sit around and read, and luckily a couple of friends in the neighborhood handed me a bunch of books. And the first book that I was handed was the Prose Edda, and the rest is, as they say, the rest is history.
That's an awesome experience. You had kind of have that, wide eye-opening moment of where you were lost and trying to find something, and then, afterwards you were looking for answers, and you turned to medical, you turned to psychological, and then somebody just gave you a book that just seems to kind of open things up for you, open that door up.
Exactly, and going and reading through everything, and I finally got to the first description of Odin in the Prose Edda.
I was about to ask.
and I'm like, and I look at the description, and that sweet old grandpa is playing in the back of my head, and I'm being told not to be afraid, and I'm just standing there, just dumbfounded in pants-shitting terror, and I'm just like, oh my fuck, I think I might have met a god.
Met the Wanderer.
And it was that experience that pretty much solidified it for me.
Oh, wow. And how did it feel once you've kind of made those connections and you've essentially, took that first step on that path after that moment?
So, again, part of, it was this monkey touching the monolith moment for me where I finally felt like there had been some truth in my life.
Right.
I had a very negative experience with Judaism growing up. Not through my family, but through being exposed to anti-Semitism at a very young age.
Oh, for sure.
And the handling of that anti-Semitism at a very young age, and the cavalier attitude towards hatred by people in positions of power. And I was torn between the feeling of, I found truth. I found something that gives me peace and makes me happy. But at the same time, as far as my family knows, I'm still a Jew, spiritually.
Right.
And for the longest time, I was literally living as a lip service Jew, and I felt so horrendously inauthentic to myself.
Can absolutely connect with that. Like, I was raised in a Christian church most of my life, and even as a teenager I'd never felt the connection, but I went along with what the family wanted, with what friends and everything kind of pushed me into the clergy, and becoming a youth leader and getting my ordination, and going through that whole path. And it never felt real to me, but it felt like something that I should do, something that everybody needed from me, everybody wanted from me. And I felt like, maybe if I just continued in this path, I'll find something, but nothing ever really stuck. And I always felt closer to nature and all that, even like researching druidry, shamanism and stuff, because I didn't know much about paganism, in the early years. We didn't have much internet during those days. The websites, that you'd search up, you'd find, this really bad HTML site with just like shamanism and how to connect with the elements and things like that. And I took that, but I went down a very similar road, with being inauthentic, staying with the religion that I was brought up in, but it never really connecting. So I totally get that.
See, it's funny you say shamanism, as one of the very first spiritual books I read prior to falling down my rabbit hole into becoming a heathen was The Way of the Shaman by Michael Harner. Mm-hmm. And Way of the Shaman led me into looking more into shamanism, and my exposure to it is a drastically different one in comparison to yours, because I found a lot of middle-aged women in Sedona who wore a lot of leather and turquoise jewelry.
Yeah. I think that...
And it was... And I'm just like, I have seen way too many documentaries about the hippie movement to, like, actually take any of this seriously.
Exactly. That one shaman, you mentioned the turquoise jewelry, but that was the total vibe of that website that I found about shamanism and all that. So I totally get that. That was the absolute vibe of that website. And that's, what caused me to keep it at a distance and not really dive into it, because it just didn't feel like it vibed with me. But the connecting with elements absolutely did. It's particularly fire, with my personality. I'm a little pyro, but yeah, like I would spend hours a day just tending a little campfire in my yard just because I enjoyed it and I felt that connection. So, absolutely.
I wish I could do that here, but in New York, that's arson.
Yeah. Absolutely. I need to plan a trip for a bunch of us to get together out in the woods and just have a good time for a weekend.
I would absolutely love to plan a big gathering like that.
I actually was going to last year for the winter solstice kind of Yule vibe, but mower broke down and my yard's an absolute mess. I've got a few acres out here and it's a perfect place to have a nice gathering. We're out in the middle of nowhere, but accessible to the main highway. It's pretty nice. But
right.
I'm wanting to do something like that. Like summer solstice is a little weird here in Florida because it's going to be 95 degrees even at sundown. So it might not be so much fun, but the winter is kind of nice, especially if you're sitting around a large fire.
Oh, hell yeah.
So after those moments, how has your Norse pagan path changed over the years? Going on that.
I initially approached being a pagan with an extreme amount of ego. And I walked into it thinking, you know what, this is the shit. I found my fucking place. I found where I could plant roots and feel good about something. And that feeling good about something bred an extreme degree of ego in me that I've basically very slowly been whittling away for the past 11 years and just learning to be absolutely humble about it. I forget who it was on TikTok, but there was one quote that was said that absolutely stuck with me for the longest time. People in pagan spaces like to give themselves titles. I am a Jarl, I am a king, I am a chieftain, I am the Volva Vitkigothi. And
sure.
The quote stuck out to essentially say, why not just admit you're nobody? Why not just admit that in the grand scheme of things, you are absolutely nothing and go with the flow?
Interesting you said that. I just don't mean to interrupt you here, but I was driving my wife yesterday. She's Christian, and I put on a Casting Crowns song, and it was about that same message that, you are nobody, and consider that like a baseline, a foundation of building up yourself. Don't, start at this high ego and have to whittle away. Start at that nobody level, that foundation, and then build yourself up with who you are. Is like a message that I took from that song. I threw the rest away, but that was a really interesting parallel. You just mentioned that. It just brought that to mind.
And it's essentially, I think, one of the biggest lessons that I've learned recently. Because I actually, for a very brief period of time, almost like 4 or 5 months, I departed pagan space on social media altogether. Because initially I had found that education and spirituality itself died in most of the spaces I occupied.
Yeah.
And through that death, it led to nothing but drama. It led to nothing but continual bickering and back and forth. And I asked quite a few people, and I've yet to get an answer for this. So whoever's listening, if you'd like to give an answer to this, drop it in the comments on the upload platform.
Yes, please.
If you remove spirituality from spiritual spaces, if ritual depletes itself, are we still pagans, or are we the trash collectors of the human condition? Nobody's been able to give me a concrete answer.
Yeah, the absence of spirituality in like the TikTok pagan space, caused me to pull back hard. Like I was, in it for, a couple of years there and trying to make these connections and trying to find my tribe. And I found one community that was really good, and then the drama inserted itself, and then it imploded. And maybe one message in that group a month, if that. Now I'm still in it, I'm still part of it, because some of the connections in there were really good connections, and I really like that. But that when you take the spirituality out of it, it just explodes, or implodes. It just destroys itself.
Exactly. I've come to learn through a very good friend of mine in Iceland. I had posed the question in a TikTok video on an old account that said, to all of my Scandinavian pagans, what is the one piece of advice you would give to your more often than not goofy as hell American cousins? One piece of advice came through like a diamond bullet straight to my temple. It said, learn to live with your spirituality, not for it. And that piece of advice is what made me sit back and reevaluate everything.
Absolutely. I like that. I'm actually going to write that down.
Hell yeah, quote it.
That might actually go in the thumbnail.
I'm honored.
So talking about the drama in the pagan space, that gives us a really good segue into some of these like more difficult conversations that I think we should have. This is coming up a lot in the Norse pagan community here lately. A lot of people standing up and making these statements against racism and white supremacy within those spaces. And so I just want to know if you could talk about that. Basically about the reputation problem within Norse paganism, and when you kind of first became aware of that problem, how you approached it.
See, I was infinitely aware of it from the jump, because when I first started to embrace this faith, I knew assholes existed in this space, and I knew they were a particular breed of asshole.
Yeah, they are.
If that makes sense. And I studied and I dug as deeply as I possibly could, and I initially, at the very start of this thing, found the Asa True Folk Assembly. And I found a conference video that was filmed in the early 90s with Stephen McNallen, and he had said something to the effect of, he had basically plagiarized the 9 noble virtues as codified by the Odinic rite. And while I won't get into that vaguely Christian bullcrap, there was one line at the bottom of what he referred to as some Odinist statements that messed with me really hard. He had said something to the effect of, ancestry is better than universalism. And that basically made me almost automatically a hardliner in how I view the growth of our faith in this country. Because the conversation was initially started by someone saying this faith was founded by racists. I genuinely have a tendency of disagreeing with that.
Right.
I wouldn't say it was founded by racists, but rather popularized by racists.
Yeah, it was definitely popularized and kind of hijacked by racists and like pushed out there a lot harder, particularly within the prison system.
Exactly. Now, while I'm fairly certain pagan groups existed prior to 1964, but if you go around digging and looking, the very first name that comes up in the American pagan lexicon is Elsie Christensen, who was very deeply all about Nazis and putting Nazi ideology into her pagan belief system. Then came Michael Murray and the Asatru Free Assembly, and that was, yet again, a veritable who's who of the problematic individuals within our community.
Right.
Like, you had names like Edred Thorson, Stephen McNallen, and anybody else who was a founding core member of what would become the Asatru Folk Assembly.
Right.
Now, this is why I very much believe that people who say, I'm an American heathen, I'm a proud American heathen, we have to acknowledge the fact that, see, hear me out, we have to acknowledge the fact that us proclaiming with Mjolnirs around our neck that we are this star-spangled awesome is foolish. The concept that American exceptionalism has made its way into our faith in this country poisons the well.
It truly does.
Which is why I very firmly believe in looking to the example of European organizations that have come before. While I acknowledge the Troth for doing good work, they're not the example that I would want to ensure others follow. Like, I look at, say, for example, the Asatruarfélagið of Iceland.
Right.
They're a small, budding organization. They've been around since the 70s. They started 10 years after Elsie Christians had planted roots in this country. And they've been going ever since. For me, I don't look at it like Iceland is some pagan equivalent of the Vatican. I look at it as they laid the groundwork.
Right.
And as Norse pagans in this country who want to set the example and get away from racists, we need to look to them, as they are the best set example.
I agree, because they are at least, a step or 10 steps closer to the culture that bred this spirituality. They've got at least a foot into that. I mean, it's modern day. It's, things have changed since the Iron Age and the Viking Age, and, even long before that. A lot of things have changed over the years, but they've at least still got a foot still in that culture and the mindset that bred this spirituality. So I totally agree with looking to them as a foundation and somebody who has set that groundwork.
Exactly. It's why I very much believe that we need to understand, and when our European pagan cousins say to us, hey, XYZ is stupid, you might want to pay closer attention to this, that is a worthy reason to go, oh shit, this is a problem, let's work on fixing it.
Right. Oh, absolutely.
Honestly, I believe that crazies exist in most religious spaces. It's kind of it's kind of a no-brainer,
It comes in all of it.
But the majority of the absolutely most unhinged statements about our faith have come out of the mouths of American pagans. I have heard nothing out of European pagans except the racist aligned ones,
right,
who preach that ethnocentric, you need to be white to be pagan gospel, essentially. But I've heard things like, you need to earn your Mjolnir, you need to draw blood on your runes in order to feel their power, you need to sacrifice what Odin sacrificed. I've heard such things where there was a person who, I didn't believe a word of it until I saw text messages, good God, said Odin charged him with being a polygamist. Okay. Which is why I hold to the very honest truth of all forms of UPG are valid. But the minute Odin commands you to rob a liquor store, we need to talk.
Yeah. Excuse me.
So, yeah.
Yeah.
I think if we're going to get ahead of the racist, mythic, literalist, dogmatic bullshit that these people are spouting, we have to adopt a semblance of, we're going to kill them with kindness.
Yeah.
I don't believe in going out there and just randomly cold cocking people we disagree with.
Right.
I've said this so many times that that we're not out here blood eagling people in the streets.
No.
We have to put feet to the ground, actually have legitimate conversations with other pagans, get to understand and know practice, and if these people who are part of hate groups want out of that life, it's not our responsibility to launch a crusade to save souls.
Absolutely.
It's our responsibility, as hospitality is a virtue we laud so deeply in our faith, that if someone comes out of a pagan hate group and says, look, I want out of this life, can you help me?
Absolutely.
It's more of an individualist basis to turn around and say, I'm going to extend my hand to you, you better not make me regret it.
Right. Yeah, we should definitely set that example. As you said, we don't need to go out there and, stir up things.
This is the one thing that I think holds true.
Mm-hmm.
Because I'm a fan of bodybuilding. Ronnie Coleman happens to be one of my favorite bodybuilders of all time. And I hear the quote, everybody want to be a bodybuilder, but don't nobody want to lift no heavy ass weights.
That's it.
The same thing goes for building and finding community. Just because you have TikTok on your phone, just because you hashtag Norse Pagan or Norse Talk or heathen, does not mean you're part of a fucking community. You're part of an algorithm.
Right.
And the majority of these larger creators, those creators who are past the 20 and 30 and 50,000 follower mark, you have to sit back and ask yourself, are these people doing this as an act of service to their faith community at large? Or are they doing this in the name of increasing their market share?
Right. Absolutely. And there's a difference.
Because
I was going to say, there's a difference. You get, as you say, everybody wants to be a bodybuilder, but nobody wants to lift the weights. It's like, it seems like in the TikTok communities or the TikTok algorithm, everybody wants to be a pagan, but nobody wants to go sit out in the woods for an hour and just listen or just connect with the earth or just do pagan shit, really. I mean, everybody wants to put on the Mjolnir and get on the camera and Valhalla, whatever, and get into those things, but nobody wants to actually jump into the spirituality. I just recorded a video yesterday, just the cosmology of Norse paganism, and I started out with a small outline, and I got to like every point of my outline, and I started talking. I'm like, fuck, that's another video. I want to dive deeper into this, and get into the spirituality and the interpretations and all that. And there's a lot of people out there want to do the pagan stuff, but they don't want to do the pagan stuff. If you get what I'm saying there.
I completely understand it. For me, it boils down to, when you look at these people who grant themselves titles, are they doing it for the community, or are they a part of a larger endemic problem with an influencer culture where cults of personality become the new form of idolatry?
Right. Oh, for sure. It's more about building up their own personal ego rather than connecting to the spirituality at large.
For me, it's the construction of a digital fiefdom, and these digital fiefdoms could be useful if parlayed and worked properly, but 9 times out of 10, and that's me being nice, 9 times out of 10, those digital fiefdoms fall flat on their asses.
Yeah. So I wanted to ask, specifically before we kind of get out of that, but have you personally experienced pushback or assumptions on yourself just because of your association with Norse paganism, whether that be online
For the
or in
most part,
public?
for the most part, no. In point of fact, I would say the most negative exposure I have ever had for being a pagan came within pagan spaces. In 2023, I was doom scrolling TikTok like you do, and I came across Matthew Flavel, who, if you don't know that name, Matthew Flavel was named the successor to Stephen McNallen. He is the current presiding Alsherjar Gothi of the Asatru Folk Assembly, and he was actively recruiting on TikTok. He had a clear org chart on the AFA's TikTok page, literally giving anybody who wanted to mess with them clear sight lines as to who to go after.
Oh, wow.
So I turned around and I tagged Matthew Flavel, because at this point I was an idealistic bulldog nipping at the kneecaps of anybody who pissed me off. And I posted some of their anti-interracial marriage, adoption, dating sentiments on this video that I put out, and I said that the AFA does not have a right to exist, that the AFA should be ripped out root and stem and their histories be scattered to the wind. I tagged a creator who will remain nameless, but this creator in turn told me that my rhetoric was disgusting and I deserved to be called out for it.
Oh, wow.
And this creator then held a live that I was dragged into, and it was it was full of older pagans coddling this man because my rhetoric of wishing the AFA destroyed sent him into a panic attack.
That's intense.
And a lot of the people who were in this live were older members of the community, older members of the heathen community who, in the late 80s, early 90s, the entire outlook was ignore them and they will go away. And I'm like, it's 2023, racism is more prevalent than it's ever been, and we're choosing to ignore it by coddling somebody who just advocated for the preservation of a racist organization.
No, it's with this modern technology, it's so much easier for, as you've witnessed, these racist organizations can recruit so much easier, so much faster, and get into people's homes and spaces and in their pockets on their cell phones. So it's definitely something that we should be absolutely aware and currently, working against. And that was one of the big reasons for this conversation.
Now, the one thing that I also have to point out was the general consensus of that live stream was every pagan alive has a responsibility to turn one racist pagan away from their racist bullshit.
That's an interesting...
Now, I happen to think that outlook is tremendously performative.
Yeah.
That outlook holds a semblance of virtue signaling beyond virtue signaling.
It reminds me of growing up in the church, and they said, bring, it was like a big thing on the church, a couple times a year. They're like, bring a guest, and it was like kind of a badge of honor to bring somebody into the church. And it was kind of weird mindset for me. It's like, are you just like bringing a trophy in? Like, what is this? It's exactly. The same kind of mindset.
And like I said at the top of it, when you had asked me this question initially, the responsibility does not fall to every pagan to turn someone from the dark and bring them into the light of Odin. I hate that turn of phrase, dear God. But what should be done and what should happen is we as pagans should look to our own doctrine, our own teachings, the philosophies in the Havamal, specifically those surrounding hospitality and reputation.
Absolutely.
If someone wants to abandon their hateful ways, if someone wants to turn their back on being part of a racially aligned pagan group, if they turn to you, they turn to a friend, and they turn to anybody, the onus lies on that pagan who's been solicited for help to turn around and say, I'm going to stick my neck out for you. I'm going to stick my neck out on the line and try to make sure that you come out of this better than you were.
It's not so much about going out and finding these lost pagans, but, having that open door, that hospitality to, welcome them in to these spaces.
Exactly. I think the very first verse of the Havamal says something to the effect of, when you enter, you should take a look around. You should take a good look around, for you never know where foes might be seated within.
Yeah.
That shit works both ways.
Yeah.
It very much works both ways, because the person who's being a good host is sticking their neck out for you, and at the same time, that person who's sticking their neck out doesn't know if you're going to turn around and stab him in the back.
Exactly.
So,
yeah. How does it feel, as somebody who's this ingrained in Norse paganism now, to see the hateful associations that we still deal with?
This is going to sound a little stupid, but I think my opinion on the matter differs differently from a lot of people. Mm-hmm. I understand and I fully acknowledge the existence of hatred, because to do anything less is dishonest. But the majority of the people who co-opted our symbols were the Nazis.
Right.
I studied the occult. I enjoy reading about the occult, especially knowing how fucking goofy it can get.
Yeah, I right along with you.
And I turned out to learning about Madame Helena Petrovna Blavatsky.
Mm-hmm.
And Madame Blavatsky basically wrote the book that laid out the entire Nazi belief system. It framed the Aryans as a godlike race of beings, and the Norse, the Vikings, were the descendants of those godly people.
Right.
When in reality, Helena Blavatsky was a freeloading, racist, occult scholar who basically said the Aryan race was a group of 8-foot-tall egg-laying hermaphrodites who lost their psychic powers because they found sex with humans too enjoyable. That is not a joke. I'm looking directly at the camera when I say this. It is completely and utterly true. There are other people on the app who, on TikTok, where we've all met and cohabitate, basically, that educate, that will show hate symbols, will speak about them at great personal risk to their accounts, and on more often than not, their own personal safety, which is commendable.
Right.
But for me, I choose to make fun. I choose to do what Mel Brooks did when he made The Producers. I will, if somebody who is that out loud and proud about their hate, I will turn around and springtime for Hitler them into submission.
Yeah. I have the same approach when it comes to like racists and just hateful people in general. Like, they're just clowns. They make clowns of themselves with the amount of hate they have, with no true like reason behind it. Like, they have their reasons, their excuses. I won't even say reasons. They have their excuses for it, but they're not real. In my mind, like their reasons and their excuses for being the way they are. I've got racist people in my family that, it's my brother, others, and I see it, and it's just, it's comical to see the things that come out of their mouths sometimes, and I just have to make fun of it. So I'm right there along with you on that.
For me, it's a genuinely wasted emotion. Like, I can hate a person for the shit they do. I can't hate a person for what they were born into this world as.
Right.
Like, you kick me in the nuts, I fall to the floor and double over, I'm gonna be pretty pissed at you for that.
Right.
Who you are, who you love, what you identify as does not factor into that in the slightest. Nope. I'm just more concerned that you booted me in the nuts for no reason.
That's it.
Now, do I think that education about racist pagan organizations needs to be more prevalent? Yes, I do.
Yeah.
I think we need to be a lot more honest about the presence of racist pagan organizations. I also think that we need to educate more on why certain authors are considered on banned books lists. I don't want to be presented a list with, don't read these guys, they're hateful. And then I would turn and ask that person, well, how are they hateful? They're just hateful. When I was presented with one of those lists for the first time, you know what it did for me? It made me want to illicitly obtain copies of those books, read through their contrite bullshit,
yep,
to understand why they're hateful.
I'm sure you saw the same list I did. It was probably 3 years ago or so. There was a spreadsheet that was bouncing around through a lot of communities and stuff that had a list of content creators, books, and everything like that. And I took that list and I watched every single one of those content creators, just binge their content and read the books. And, and like some of those people on that list didn't belong on the list. And then others, it's like, oh, you definitely belonged on this list. But at the same time, if you go through their content or their books or whatever, and you start to unwrap what they are and who they are and why they believe this, it allows you to dissect it a little better and to combat it a lot better. But I think it should be somebody with an open mind to go into these things, somebody who's not going to be tempted or swayed into those directions.
Exactly. Like, for example, what my prime author outside of like McNallen and some of the things Thorson's written, Galina Kreskova.
Name sounds familiar, but I'm not.
She wrote a book called A Modern Guide to Heathenry.
Oh yeah, okay, yeah.
Now, she was a lot more subtle in her racism. It was very subtly veiled Islamophobia and leading into some other rather nasty things. But it was her husband, an author who went by Sannion, Sannion, who was full-blown, out loud and proud, bro, I wish I was living in 1945 Nazi.
Right.
And admittedly, when I first started walking this path, I bought a copy of A Modern Guide to Heathenry, and I didn't understand in the slightest the implications of her hatred because it was so cleverly written and so well veiled behind really good writing.
Absolutely, yeah. I think I have the PDF of that book on my computer that I went through, and yeah, it was definitely, as you say, it was very well written, and it got me thinking about some of those values and things that should put into it. It got me thinking about that stuff, and then after a while, after digesting it and really sitting with it, it was like, okay, these things shouldn't be part of this, and I've got to learn how to differentiate with it. I mean, there's still good stuff in that book, but then all that veiled underlining tone that's in it definitely is problematic in a lot of ways.
See, and then not only are there authors who are problematic for genuine racist reasons, homophobic reasons, transphobic, what have you, you then have authors who go so far out of left field in what we know in our semblance of academia. When I first got Audible, for example, every Asa True for Beginners book is currently sitting in my library because I just like different perspectives.
Right.
There was an Asatru 101 book written by a woman named Erin Lale. It is arguably the worst book I have ever read. Not because it's bad, but because it essentially plays out like Tommy Wiseau, director of The Room, decided to write a book on Asatru. He just threw a bunch of concepts into a hat and just got drunk and threw it at a wall and wrote about what stuck. I mean, there's literally a section on the Norse perception of circumcision in this book, where I'm just like, what?
Yeah, I can understand, like, as you mentioned, UPG is valid, and I get into some of these books, and it's like, okay, this is talking about Norse paganism, but, like, 80% of this book is very Wiccan. Like, why is this? And I understand your UPG and how you have these connections, but this isn't Norse. This is something completely different. I mean, you can be eclectic, you can be Wiccan Norse if you want to. It's completely valid. But when you present spirituality as under the umbrella of that spirituality term, say Norse paganism, you have to represent it honestly, and don't like using the word historically, but that's true.
See, I would word it more along the sense of not viewing it historically, but rather being respectful to the source material.
Culturally, I think that would be a better term.
Having that level of respect towards the source material, because it's okay to go 5 miles west, 5 miles east of the source material, but when you're like in California and the source material's in Beijing, what the hell are you doing?
Right. Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And that was one of the shameless plug here. One of the reasons I'm working on my own Norse spirituality book and trying to keep it as true to the culture, as true to the source material as possible, but also expanding on that and opening the doors for UPG to get into it so that the readers can, interpret it in their own ways. Because just trying to pull up, like you said, you get Audible, you start downloading all these books, and it was hard really trying to find an Asatru or heathen book that was true to the source, other than actually just going straight to the source, the Eddas, the sagas, etc.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Like, for the longest time, I wanted solid books, and I had a remarkable streak of luck in finding them. I have the sagas in my library, got a couple of good archaeology books I like, but it's exactly as you said it, and as exactly as I said it. There are so many authors who it genuinely feels like they don't know what the hell they're doing. I had someone message me on Discord not too long ago asking me if it is a legitimate practice incorporating alchemical symbols into bind runes.
No.
They showed me the information, and the author was a very big fan of Aleister Crowley and like 1920s European esoterica.
Right.
And I'm just like, no, this isn't remotely accurate. It's a thing, but it's a thing that shouldn't be there.
Right. What would you say to somebody who's new to Norse paganism and wanting to understand it a little better, both combating the racist people within the Norse paganism umbrella, and also, explaining to them what Norse paganism is and where it kind of comes from?
So I think the biggest piece of advice that I would give to somebody, and I would first say to somebody, I don't care how you got here. I care that you're here. I like that. Because ironically, it was Anton LaVey and the Church of Satan that made me becoming a Norse pagan that much easier. In the nine satanic statements, one of the things LaVey says is, place your faith in a religion that has your best interests at heart, mine or otherwise. He flat out fully understood that not everybody was going to buy what he was selling.
Right.
And I would say, first and foremost, I care that you're here, but I also want to and care that you made the right decision in being here. That's number one. I would then turn around and say that bad people exist. It's not going to be a question of avoiding them. You're going to run headlong into them. And I would point people in the direction of certain sources that teach and explain why this shit is hateful, why this shit is stupid. And as someone who's been in the faith for upwards of 11 years at this point, I would avail myself of a new pagan and say, look, I might not be able to answer right away, but if you've got questions, I'd be glad to answer. I very firmly believe in people who've been on the path a lot longer should be that guiding hand.
Oh, yeah. If I don't have the answers, we work this out together. We'll find the answers.
Exactly. And I think if I could offer a singular piece of advice, like just one absolutely pristine, pure piece of advice, it would be patient.
Oh, sure.
For the simple fact that I go into this having an experience with what I genuinely believe to be divinity. And when I finally put an altar together and I started worshiping and praying and going about my day, I see a face in the incense smoke, and it was a little bit further validation for me to want to keep going. But in my excitement for having that experience revisit me, I kept pushing harder and harder, and I kept hearing less and less and less, and it became almost depressing. I put my faith into expecting experience, but not getting it back. And that first experience with Odin, that seeing the picture of the face in the smoke, I liken it to taking shrooms for the first time. I liken it to that psychedelic trip where everything in your body is heightened and these visuals are so beautiful and so profound. The only thing you want is to get that back. And when you don't get that back, it is painful.
I think, we as pagans and just people in spirituality in general, we look for that mountaintop all the time, but we're constantly going up and down. We're hiking the mountain trail. Sometimes we're on that peak, sometimes we're not, and that's okay.
Exactly. It's so important to understand that when the gods speak, listen. But don't enter ritual every time expecting to hear something.
Right. Sometimes it's just silence, and that's okay.
Exactly. I would also point out that it's super important to be able to live in the present when you're in ritual. Whether you're leaving offerings for the gods, or you have a picture of an ancestor that you so dearly miss and you can't make your way out to the cemetery to sit before their grave and just talk. It's living in that moment, living in that present. It's almost this like sense of beautiful isolation.
Yeah, like I have
for me, I
was gonna say, like, I have a personal ritual that I kind of have every morning, or I would say 6 out of 7 days a week, where I call it coffee with the gods or coffee with the ancestor or something like that, where you just take a moment, drink your coffee, your tea, your water, your Red Bull, whatever it may be, just sip on it slowly, have that conversation, and you may not get anything back or anything like that, but it's definitely, it's living in that moment and just talking about what's going on at that particular time.
And if something speaks up, that's another phenomenal piece of advice that I'm sure you've suggested this time and time again. If you experience something, write it down.
Let's say I got a stack of notebooks right here.
And I'm not talking about jumping onto your iPhone while the incense is burning and the candles are lit. I'm talking finish ritual and put pen to paper. Snail mail, literally snail mail this shit.
Yeah. And it helps you understand your own experiences and your own situations. Just by regurgitating that onto paper will allow you to pull back so much more understanding, even if it's not immediately. When you go back and read it later, you're like, oh wow, that was something profound that I totally missed in the moment, but you can come back.
Exactly. It's a mechanism of processing. Like, I look at it like this: if you feel like you heard somebody whispering to you in ritual, and you tell somebody about it, like, well, what'd they say? What did you hear? And you're just standing there like an idiot, write that shit down.
Yeah. Oh, for sure.
Understand it. And then the other thing I would also say that is just so important for newer pagans is, just because somebody calls you brother, just because somebody calls you kin, or hits you with a skål min brodir, it does not mean that you're automatically being welcomed into a family. People absolutely have bastardized familial relation in our faith, and it's genuinely funny. Not everybody's gonna be your brother, not everybody's gonna be your sister, and
No.
it comes down to also understanding who is going to be with you in the long run, who is going to help you further solidify those ties, not only with faith but with community.
For sure. Like, I get that brother thing quite a bit. And, I don't want to be rude, but it's like, I'm not your brother. That's a title that should be earned. Like, that's a family. That's, like they say, the blood of the covenant is, that's something you have to,
the water of the womb. Exactly.
That's something you have to earn. Like, I've got a first cousin, and he is my brother 110%. Like, that's one of the few people that I would say, this guy is my brother, and I would die or kill for that guy. It's like, and then when somebody that a complete stranger wants to call me brother, it feels icky.
It's why along my very high grade series of high strangeness and lampooning the crap I've seen on pagan social media, it's why one of the things I say, because not only have people just overused the term brother, when they try to go into the Old Norse spellings, like, people forget how to spell anyway. I've left many a broken English teacher in my wake. Like, I saw somebody try to spell sister in Old Norse and it came out as sauce tire. So this is why when I've, like, busted into characters in the Norse space, I say some shit like Hailsa Skull, Handshake, Bowlman, Brodeers, and Sauce Tires. It's literally just as a way of saying, bro, just live your fucking life. You don't need to, like, the modern Viking aesthetic is stupid enough as it is. You don't need to make your mushmouth abilities with English even shittier.
You don't need to appropriate a language you don't understand, for one.
Exactly.
And it's like what's the hail, the one that everyone likes to use that doesn't mean what they think.
Permit the ethnic Jew to chime in on this one. Halog Sayel, which literally, if I remember my translations correctly, it means happy and healthy. And people are using Halog Sayel as, yo, what's good, Halog Sayel? No, bro, that's literally the Old Norse equivalent of fucking L'chaim.
My favorite, see you later, skull. Like, no.
See, I had to explain this to somebody when I overused skull at one point. Mm-hmm. I first came up in the restaurant industry in Irish bars. So saying cheers as somebody left the building became a commonplace thing. Right. And because I shit you not, I worked in an Irish bar that was owned by Scandinavians.
Nice.
So I said skull a whole fucking lot.
Yeah.
And it became this, like, when I realized how much of a linguistically inappropriate running gag it became, I'm just like, okay, I'm shutting my mouth now.
Yeah. Absolutely. It's just that mentality just it's funny. So
I mean, the one
I was going to say, so as we've talked about what Norse pagan is not, in the simplest terms, how would you describe what it is to somebody new to the faith, or somebody just outside of it just is curious about what it is?
Now, if I were to give a joke answer, I would say that it is a bunch of giant nerds who have come together to rebuild a dead religion.
Yeah.
And if I were to give a serious answer, it would be a bunch of nerds who love reading who came together to rebuild a dead religion. And you know what? The joke answer and the real answer is still highly applicable. I lean very heavily Reconstructionist. I don't like to put a very high emphasis on personal experience over academia.
Right.
Because, and I like what I do, and my approach to understanding history and learning things, I think, is what makes me a better heathen, opposed to having gone the route that a lot of people do and saying, oh, well, this felt like this to me, so this must be the way it is.
Right. I like the idea of, taking the source and the historical reconstruction aspect of it as laying a foundation, putting the brick on the walls, and getting it started. But there are gaps, just because our sources are, one, incomplete. Some of them come through biased lenses, and we understand that. And using UPG to sort of fill in the gaps and to just broaden the understanding of that. But you have to keep those foundations intact, otherwise the whole thing crumbles and it becomes something else. It's not what it was initially. It becomes something new. And if that's your path, that's fine, but accept that it is something else and not Asatru, Norse paganism, whatever title you want to put on that.
Exactly. And for those of us in Heathenry 102, one of the other interesting points, because you had brought up literary biases, I have made the point, and this will go to people who read the Prose Edda. Snorri was a Christian. Snorri was attempting to establish divine right to rule for the kings of Norway.
Yes.
Among a myriad of other things. And the one thing I never understood, outside of, well, he's a Christian, is why people give Snorri Sturluson so much shit. And then it hit me. I put out a video where I just looked at the camera and I simply said, Jeg Snorri Sturluson, Misa Jaja Binks. How are these the same? Both are hated characters in their respective lenses of media.
Yes.
But at the same time, no matter how much you shit on both of them, they are so very, very important for driving the plot forward.
Exactly. If without Snorri's works, there would have been so much that was lost. He preserved more than we can arguably say any other single individual in history. Like, he put in a lot of work. And granted, there may be some biased lenses for some of his stuff, and you got to kind of take it from that and understand that that's where it's coming from. But at the same time, you have to give respect and honor for somebody that actually went through the work and did preserve a lot of those stories, those sacred stories that we hold so dearly and that we've got today.
Exactly. It's, for me, I wish we had more concrete lore. I wish we had more to go on in our stories, but I have to accept the fact that we don't, and we never will.
Yeah.
So it leads me to ask the question, and I will pose this to anybody who listens or watches this. We have the lore we have now. We have everything we could read, everything we could hear, everything we could see. How do we live as pagans in the now? Because I've noticed a lot of this, and I've been guilty of it at times. A lot of people I know can have done the same. We are so 10 toes down with discussing the past to the point we're basically living in it. How do we live in the now as pagans? How do we build a living tradition that is respectful to what came before to pave the way for a better tomorrow?
Absolutely. As you said, the time of living in the past is we need to take a step from that. Take a step out of the past and just into the present, and then let's move this forward and have these conversations and dive deep into the lore and explain our understandings, just like this cosmology video I did yesterday. Little preview, like I took, like when you start looking at the Yggdrasil and the 9 worlds, and you start like dissecting that, and what does this mean? What is this? And I kind of built my own little analogy for that, and we could hate on Tolkien's maps on another time, but like reading The Lord of the Rings, The Hobbit, The Silmarillion, and you get all these different texts, just like we have all these different texts, with Norse pagan mythology. Not to compare like a fictional story with the mythology, but having that map in the front or the back of the book helps you take those stories and make it real. And the same way, like the cosmology, you can take these myths and understanding the 9 worlds and how they interact and how they're laid out. You can take those myths and the stories, and you can essentially make them concrete and kind of bring them to life and to build that understanding. Like with Thor's journey to Utgard, you understand what that whole voyage, not voyage, that adventure, what it took to get to that point, and all those things. It's just like diving deep into it and building our understanding of these stories and of the spirituality, and taking that into the future and spreading it with each other, sharing it, having these conversations, dissecting it, and sharing ideas, and kind of like putting it all together and building that new spirituality.
Exactly.
Speaking of that, spirituality and putting it into practice, as far as your opinions and your current path, what do you see as like, what does actual practice look like for a modern Norse pagan? Like a regular week, a month, a day, or whatever you want to take. What would you like to see that daily actual practice for a modern Norse pagan? How do you see that?
Personally, for me, I start with just simple gestures. Mjolnir continuously is around my neck. I usually have an oath ring on my wrist. Every night, I leave offerings, I burn a little incense, and I meditate. And if I'm asking for something, I ask. But 9 times out of 10, it's just me sitting in front of my altar, clearing my mind, and just readying myself for the next day. Now, do I follow the concepts of the Havamal to the T? No. But I understand the basic precepts of what that book teaches. Be a good host, travel, and live cautiously, but at the same time, live well, because that is how you will be remembered.
And having that reciprocity, like being a good host, but also being a good guest.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And I think that we need to understand that glamorizing the past can only get us so far. Glamorizing the Viking Age through media and books and whatnot of that nature will only do so much to further the cause of modern paganism.
Yeah, absolutely. Just like that article I posted the other day, it's more than just a Viking aesthetic. It's cool. You want to cosplay. If that's your fandom that you want to get into, the Viking aesthetic, that's cool. But it's time we separate that from the spirituality.
Exactly. It boils down to people actually getting the fuck offline, pardon my French, making plans to meet. If it's just for coffee, so be it. But actually making these plans to meet, to getting to know each other, to making these actual physical connections offline. Because, frankly, yes, I have a Discord server. Yes, I have people in that Discord server. But that will only get us so far. It's Discord and communication apps like that are great for building connections. But as far as I'm concerned, that only lays the foundation for those connections. It doesn't push forward into ensuring those connections have any remote degree of staying power at all.
It makes the connections, but it does not build a true community.
Exactly.
And, having these in-person meetups and interactions is practicing that hospitality that is so important in the Havamal.
Exactly. It's so... There's value in acknowledging that physical presence needs to be had, because you can have Frith online. You can maintain Frith online, but you need to step offline. It is never 100% one way or the other. It has to be an even balance.
Absolutely. If you could tell a new or beginner pagan just one thing to add to their day or week, what would you think that would be?
It's two things, actually, and you know the person who coined this catchphrase. Take your shoes off, get in the grass, and hug a fucking tree.
Yep.
It's so important to be able to just ground yourself, to be able to just walk your happy ass outside and feel the grass beneath your feet.
Absolutely. Just feel that connection with the ground. And people in my daily life have kind of coined like the hug a fucking tree has been kind of a tagline of mine here lately. Somebody's a little upset or freaking out. I'm like, hey, go hug a fucking tree.
Yeah. It's so important, though, that one kernel of advice bears that level of wisdom. I've heard people say that pagans need physical gathering spaces. I'm like, dude, nature is our church.
I don't know if you've noticed, but on a lot of my TikTok videos, there's one little image in the TikTok thing that says the forest is my church, and I like to stick it on there just to put that seed in so many people's minds, because it is so true and it's so real.
For me, I think one of the very first places that I ever got to hike through and understand, well, there's a place out on Long Island called Welwyn Nature Preserve.
Mm-hmm.
It's 13 miles of trails leading to a private beach where on a clear day you could see across the Long Island Sound to Connecticut.
Wow.
And the more you push into the woods, the less and less you hear from the outside world. There's this weird thing where the street on the outside of the preserve could be so busy, but the minute you're 10 feet into the woods, it's as though nature itself shut off the outside world.
Yeah.
There was a place I hiked in Arkansas, literally right in the middle of hot springs. It's up a mountain. And the feeling of getting higher and higher up into the mountain, while powerful, and for a larger dude like me, it was quite the hike, but for getting higher and higher up into the mountain, the less and less I heard of the city.
Absolutely.
There's something so profound of being able to go so far into nature that the only thing you could hear is your brain processing, and that's it.
And it's so quiet, but there's so much to hear in that same moment.
Exactly.
Like I
Exactly.
tell people, hear everything and nothing all at the same time, and it is so beautiful.
Yes! How it feels for me, and it's so tremendously validating to hear somebody else say that.
Yeah, that's one of the things I do. I have just the benefit of where I work is on about 100 acres, and most of it's in a nature. I'd say it's a kind of a preserved land. It's the owner has put it into a preservation easement, so nothing can be done to it for a very very long time. And he had this like little walking bridge built over a natural spring creek that just it's like this deep. There's not much water flowing, but it's a natural spring creek that just flows through his property, and I just love to sit on that little footbridge and just listen because there's so many like I'm surrounded on one side of the bridge is about 6 acres of wildflowers, and the other side's about another 4 acres of wildflowers, and just the bees and the birds. There's probably 30 bird houses all over all that property, a couple of bat houses, and you can hear them. Like if you stop and listen, you can hear the bats chirping about 200 yards away, and it's powerful to be able to just be around that and hear all those little things and silence all at the same time.
Yes, exactly.
I consider myself quite blessed to be able to work on a property like that. That I can just hop on a four wheeler, take a 5 minute ride up into the woods, and just chill.
Exactly. Like, I also have the disadvantage of being in a major city. I mean, I admit to no small degree of jealousy for my pagan friends in the southern states, where nature is at minimum an hour drive.
Yeah.
But at the same time, nature is more readily accessible to y'all than it is to me.
Right.
So I think what's also very important is we don't pay a lot of attention to the pagans that are in large urban centers. Most of the pagans that speak up and educate are out in the fucking woods as often as possible. Their
Very true.
backyard leads into a forest. And I will admit to no small degree of deep-seated middle finger in the air ass envy about that.
What advice could you give a new pagan that lives in a city or maybe doesn't have a vehicle to be able to drive an hour plus out into nature?
Nature exists. You just have to find it. For me, if I'm not going out to Long Island to go hiking, I go to a small place not too far from my job called Gantry State Park.
Hmm.
Now, you've seen footage from New York. It is one of the most iconic things in New York City, the Pepsi Cola sign on the water. That sign is contained within that state park. That state park is also a nature preserve surrounded by a bunch of really, really luxury high-rise buildings. Now, the tenants of those high-rise buildings pay for luxury park maintenance. So you have a bunch of really just, again, obscenely wealthy individuals. As part of their rent, they're maintaining the upkeep of a state park. And when that park is in full bloom, there are certain pathways where the minute you walk under an archway of leaves or a trellis of flowers, you don't hear the city.
That's awesome.
And it's that same very brief level of quiet, but at the same time, the most commanding thing you see, the most commanding presence, is Manhattan just across the water. You see all of these buildings just punching up into the sky while you're in this little tiny slice of nature, and you're just like, as much as I fucking hate being here, I love being here.
Yeah.
God damn.
Yeah. One thing I had somebody recently reach out to me. They live in an apartment in a major city. I believe she said Baltimore. And, she's like, well, I can't I don't have a car. I'm, have a disability. I don't drive. I have to take a bus or whatever everywhere. How can I get these connections to nature? And my advice was look up. There's the sun and the moon in your sky. There's clouds around you. There are weeds poking up through the cracks of the sidewalk. A bird feeder on your windowsill. You have birds like that. Like you can have those connections with nature even within a city. I mean, in New York, it might just be a pigeon. I don't know. I've never been.
Lots and lots of them.
Lots of pigeons. But at the same time, that nature is everywhere if you look for it, and if you just open your eyes, open your mind, and just to accept, like I said, the sun and the moon is above all of us at some point during the day. It's there, and you can just appreciate that connection with nature. And if it's the mythology behind Mani and Sun, Soul, Suna, just like the mentality, just thinking about their myths and their story, and the deep meanings behind their affection for each other and what they do for the world. There's the sun and the moon right above your head, and it's like something that you can have that connection with. I used to love coming home at night because I would get out of my car or truck, open the gate, and just look up, and the moon is at that time of night when I always came home. The moon was always in one position right over my pond, and it was just so freaking beautiful. And I don't get that anymore because now I'm coming home before dark, and that's I got to start going back out there for that.
I could say the same when I spent the almost 5 months I did living down in Florida.
Mm-hmm.
I had the unspeakable luxury of there was a lake right outside my back door.
Nice.
And being able to meditate at that lake by moonlight was one of the most profoundly perspective shifting experiences for me.
Oh, for sure.
Feeling every individual blade of grass underfoot coming into contact with my skin, feeling just the cold air coming off that lake and blowing in my face, not in my hair, but blowing in my face, was so... It was just fucking beautiful, man.
Oh, for sure. For sure. So, moving on, let's talk about the Common Hearth. And, just kind of get into basically what this community is, what planted the seed to make you want to start this particular community.
So, the Common Hearth essentially sprang out of a very jokey thought exercise I had with a coworker.
Okay. Usually the best ideas
This coworker I have is a huge quote fanatic.
Mm-hmm.
We talk about quotes, we philosophize about quotes. I love this person to death for that reason. And this person turned around and said to me and said, if you turned around and made the Norse Pagan equivalent of Turning Point USA, you'd make the world a better place. And I'm just like, what? And I'm like, okay. And I just started writing down the pros and cons of everything I experienced dealing with certain pagan organizations, how I felt, how other people felt, what I thought they could have added, what I thought they lacked.
Right.
And again, I looked to the Icelanders for deeper insight. And I came up with what is the one thing, the one fixture that a lot of our rituals involve? Fire. What is the one gathering place that was so omnipresent? The hearth. It was where stories were shared. It was where meals were shared. Tears were shed. Medicine given. The hearth is such an omnipresent fixture in the lives of our spiritual and ancestral forebears that I didn't want to honor a deity in coining the name for the org I'm building, but rather the most eponymous fixture in everyone's lives.
The hearth is where life happened.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I hold the hearth to the standard of ritual is voluntary. There's no pressure to take part. If you want to sit on the sidelines and watch and understand, great, you can do that too. And we stand in direct antithesis to what every racist asshat with a Mjolnir thinks they are.
Right.
We fully accept that our faith does have its inherent political aspects to it. I encourage people to have these hard conversations, because if we bottle them up, claiming apoliticality is an act. And I want us to be able to move forward, not as just as an organization, but as people in this faith. And I also very much believe, because if TikTok is the litmus test for community construction, we need better contractors, that we need to build slow. We need to grow as organically as humanly possible, because these communities that just pop up overnight with 100+ members die in a week.
Fizzle out just as fast. I've been a member of a few of those, and that was kind of the idea of when I created the Pagan Temple. It was just open doors. Come in, ask questions if you want to, participate in the discussions. If you just want to sit back and listen, just be a lurker, as they say, in the community and the conversations, that's perfectly okay. And this isn't, if you want it to be your forever home as far as a community, that is awesome. If you move on to another community, that's also great. And just, with this conversation with you about the Common Hearth and the conversations in the chat and everything before, seeing what you're trying to do with the Common Hearth, that kind of solidifies a lot of my vision for the Pagan Temple. We're pulling in pagans from all these different paths. I've got Norse pagans in the community that they haven't come across a Norse pagan community specifically, and they're kind of new on their path. I've got some people that have been on it for a couple of years, and they just don't have a home. And I see the Pagan Temple, bringing these people in, these beginners, making sure that they're on the path that's best for them, and kind of pushing them out to a better community that would help them grow into their own spirituality. And if that's the Common Hearth, that's what it is. So these connections, these conversations and partnerships, I think, are going to be huge with that.
See, and I also, as this is going to come off with a lot of what? But I also credit the TikToker Reverend Rosie for how I conduct myself. She had put out a video ages ago that still fucking rings true with me to this day, and it asked a very simple question: is it better to make your followers feel welcomed or wanted? And Reverend Rosie turned around and flat out said, if all you're doing is making your people in your community feel welcomed, you are half-assing your job. She then went on to say, if you are understanding what people are going through, talking to your people, knowing their struggles, knowing what they deal with, and you make them feel appreciated, even through the things that bring them down, you will be a remembered leader. You will be an effective leader.
Absolutely. Very powerful. So, in your own words, what is specifically the Common Hearth, but an inclusive community like the Common Hearth? What does it look like in practice? What values guide this community for you?
So I'm going to have to just put up one big old caveat here.
Sure.
Just one. Universalist paganism is prescriptive universalism, meaning that it does not matter who you are, it does not matter where you come from. If you choose to embrace this as your faith, and you are earnest and sincere in that desire to practice this faith, we will help you. We will celebrate that. However, if you are a person who chooses to hurt the ideals of universalism, racists, transphobes, anything with isms, ists, and phobias on the end of a descriptive word,
Right.
the door is closed and your ass is not permitted to sit at the table with us. That is to say, however, doing a small callback to a previous conversation, if a person chooses to abandon their previous hateful way of life, abandon their hate, and again, it goes back to that earnest sincerity that we're looking for. If you're sincere in wanting to turn away from hate groups, want to turn away from racism, we're going to help you, and we're going to try to elevate you to a position where you could see, wow, everything I learned was incorrect.
Right. So it all kind of still comes back to that hospitality mindset, bringing people in, being a good host, but also being a good guest. You come into our space, you got to leave the hate and all that out the door. You're welcome here. You as a person are welcome here. You're wanted in this community. You're a part of this community. But that negativity, that all the, like you said, the ists and isms and all that, is left outside the door. And you got to forsake that, and you got to throw it away. There's a recycling bin out there. No, not even a recycling bin. It's a compost bin. We're going to just turn it into the earth. We're going to get rid of it.
It's like I've said to several people when I hear about people admitting that they're racist, and it turns into, oh, this person is racist because they're pagan. I'm like, no, not even remotely. It's because how they were taught the faith was perverted by racists. And I turn around and flat out say, I'm not anti-doctrine. I'm anti-people, because it's people that pervert doctrine.
Yeah. It's as they say, shitty people do shitty things.
I wouldn't even say that. It's good Lord, I sound like a an NTSB inspector saying this. It's the human factor.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Because of humanity's capacity to be shitty.
Yeah. Yes, definitely. Actually, I had a very similar conversation with somebody earlier today. I'm wanting to get into the topic because it's irrelevant to this conversation, but there's the human factor. There are going to be shitty people in that. There's going to be humans that are just not good people. Unfortunately, that's a reality of this world. But there's far more good people in this world, and that's what we should focus on. And as we mentioned earlier, just laugh at the racists and push them out the door.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Let's focus on the good. Let's take the step forward. Let's move forward with the good and leave all the crap behind us.
But at the same time, while we have to focus on the good, education and understanding of the bad needs to be there. Everything has to exist within an even balance, because if we lean too far into the good, when something really shitty comes along and decides to bitch slap somebody off their perch, it's the end of the world. If we have a good solid understanding of everything that could be problematic to us, we're already prepared to potentially mount an offensive, so to speak.
Yeah. And you mentioned the education and the understanding. That's actually the tagline of the Pagan Temple: education builds understanding. And if we can stick to those foundations, I think we can build a better tomorrow.
Exactly.
Yeah.
For me, the words of my kindred ring true for the common hearth. The Icelandic phrase "Við erum sterkari saman," we are stronger together.
Absolutely.
There's so much division. There is so much ridiculous, child-minded crap that has fractured so much potential within the community at large, that if we all manage to not put aside our differences, but instead have a conversation to somehow celebrate commonality, while at the same time exposing and educating about the things that could be potentially harmful to us,
yes,
we all are collectively in a better position.
Oh, for sure. What have been your biggest surprises building this community so far? Good, both good and bad. I knew this would open something up here.
Good for the fact that people want to join. Good for the fact that people are genuinely tired of the status quo.
Absolutely.
And I wouldn't say bad, I would just say really freaking weird. I go to check the Common Hearth's TikTok because I do have viewer history turned on. And I see what looks like a blue wizard hat walking through a forest of mushrooms, and I'm like, do I know this person? So I go click on viewer history. Varg Vikernes's actual TikTok account found the Common Hearth.
Hell yeah.
Which is both like, holy crap, but I'm like, I hope he does not click the link tree because he's going to be pissed because I did an entire podcast episode talking a bunch of shit about him, but he deserves it.
It is what it is, man.
Exactly. But if I wake up to a duet going, Varg Vikernes created a duet with you, and I hear, let's find out, I'm going to laugh my ass off first and foremost, but at the same time it's just like, the most hubristic, egotistical, racist sociopath in the black metal scene found my page, and he takes offense to my content.
Publicity might be a good thing.
No, it won't. No, it won't. Not at all.
Certainly be entertaining, that's for sure.
No.
What would you say to a Norse pagan that is looking for a community and is maybe looking at the Common Hearth or other communities out there?
I would simply say, use your discernment. Use that good, honest judgment that you know you have. Mm-hmm. Where if you want to hang out, hit us up. Jump into our Facebook group. Jump into our group chat on Facebook. It's that while I'm working on building our Discord server, that particular group chat is a way for everybody to get to know each other, is a way for everybody to talk, forge those bonds that initially solidify community outside of us all being pagans.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And it boils and that whole are we a good fit for you goes both ways.
Yeah.
Like, I want to make sure people are good for the community, but at the same time, I would like people to make sure that the community that we're trying to build is also good for them.
Oh, for sure. That's my mindset with the temple. Is like, if this isn't for you, it's okay. You know, maybe it's a temporary home, maybe it's a forever home, but I want to help people find that community that fits them, that helps them grow, that helps them be a better person, to be more spiritual, etc.
100%.
What would be some things you'd tell them to look for in a healthy community? Like, let's go green flags, red flags kind of thing. What would be some green flags?
Green flag off the bat would definitely be minimal Discord bot usage.
Mm-hmm.
Because I've gone into too many servers where there's a welcome bot instead of a person. Like, I'll join a Discord server, it's a welcome bot with my picture going, hey bud, welcome to the steel taints of Odin or whatever. And I go into the group chat and say hi. It's like that scene in a Western where the guy new to town walks into the saloon, everything just stops dead and I get stared at. I personally look for a more personal touch during base interaction with community. If there's a higher emphasis on bots, it removes that semblance of personal touch.
I agree with that. With the temple, we do have a welcome bot. We call it the Temple Sage. It's an AI bot. It opens like conversations and just kind of like says, hey, you know, welcome, what brings you in, kind of thing. But for me,
right.
It's more like it shows up as my notification to get in there and start making those connections. That's kind of
Exactly.
like a temporary hold until I or another council member can, interact with that individual and welcome in and tell them, about the different channels. If you have a questions, you can ask it in the channel. You have a personal question, my DMs are always open, and just kind of, have that big welcome thing. And I would love to take the bot out of the equation, but our community would need more leaders for that to happen, I feel, in
See,
our community.
see, for you, it's a method of accountability.
Yeah.
But like, I'm speaking more along the sense of somebody plops into your server, the bot's the thing to say hi, and then nobody else bothers.
Yeah, I've actually
That
joined servers and was in for like 2 days and nobody said a word to me, and it's like, okay, I'll leave. I mean, it's on me to
that
to talk with the community, but it's also on the community leaders to welcome people in. It's that whole hospitality thing. And if it's not there, it just doesn't feel like a good fit.
to me that makes it incredibly, incredibly impersonal.
Absolutely.
But another green flag that I would have to say is like anybody who, and I hate using this term, but the everyday rank and file of a community.
Hmm.
It's fine if somebody who's just a member of the community reaches out to you and says, "Hey, how you doing? Everything okay? Welcome, blah blah blah." I come from a background in the restaurant industry, and it's always to me a very special thing when the chef takes time out of killing himself on the line and guiding his team to actually come out and say, "Hey, how are you? Hope you're enjoying the meal."
I can
Like
absolutely relate with that.
I hold a motto in my own head from my days of working in Irish bars: come as a stranger, stay as a friend. And I try, at the very least, to hold myself to that standard, and in doing so, I like to think that I'm making the right move.
Just that personal touch
Absolutely.
from, as you say, like rank and file, like I don't like hierarchy so much, but you got to have leaders. They don't necessarily need a title, but leaders will show themselves, and just having
See,
that leadership mentality to come in and welcome new people in and interact, it means a lot in a community.
exactly. And I personally go into it saying I don't expect for leadership to be interacting with me every day.
Right.
But if leadership were to actually like react to a message I'd put in a Discord server, or actually question the logic of something I'd say in an
Hmm.
educational section of the server,
Right.
again, it goes a long way towards answering that question: is it better to make your people feel welcomed or wanted?
Absolutely. I like that. What would you say would be your biggest red flag? And you mentioned the bots in the server, but as far as a community at large, just something.
Overt. I can put up the bricks and knock these fuckers down real quick.
Yeah.
Overt emphasis on politics. Like, I don't care about having a discussion. I've been in certain servers that hold a section of a server just for political discussion, so it doesn't
Mm.
spill out into other places.
Right.
Which, and it works. I'm fine with that.
Yeah.
But if I go into a server and I see memes of a current sitting president holding a bald eagle, and that bald eagle has an apple pie in its fucking talons, I'm just like, what am I doing here? Like,
Yeah.
really, what the fuck am I doing here?
Yeah.
Then backfence talk.
Hmm.
I I fucking detest it.
Yeah.
I genuinely feel like if I'm in a server and I deal with XYZ as far as drama is concerned, and I get a DM from somebody going, "Can you believe what that asshole did? Can you believe it?" I'm like, leave me the fuck alone.
Close. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Um. Now, here is the thing. If somebody says something or does something homophobic or racist, and we come to the understanding that they are just legitimately willfully ignorant, and a decision to re-educate and better their understanding is presented, I'm all for the betterment of humanity, and I'm all for the betterment of people. But if that re-education and that increase in understanding is forgotten about, and that person repeats that behavior and they choose to shelter problematic behavior, I'm done. That is an automatic leave server.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. And like when it gets into the politics, depending, it doesn't even matter which side of that on. Even if it's stuff that I agree with, like I don't want to see it. Spirituality is not a place for politics, and that could be an argument for another video, another day, whatever. Because politics, especially in the U.S., are so ingrained into culture nowadays. But we need these spaces free of that too. And I think...
See, now I would have to interject on one point, though.
Sure.
Because in the Substack article I wrote when this first hit social media, I bring up the point that modern heathenry, Norse paganism, Asatru, whatever tag you want to pin onto it, it is a confluence of mythology, history, and culture. And the Althing was the center of Icelandic politics. If you read our sagas, Iceland was notoriously anti-monarchy. That's why the Althing was there. And it was this collective coming together to solve problems, to figure shit out, and to enact policy.
Right.
Which is why, like I said, not completely... like an even sprinkling of politics in a pagan space, I'm okay with it. So long as it's done right, so long as it is carefully curtailed not to spill out into other sections of an already successful community.
Right. And doesn't become a defining factor of that community.
Exactly. Like, I saw a group on Facebook. It said, I think it was like, conservative witch/pagan safe space.
Yep. I've seen it, and right-wing witches and pagans. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. I'm like, dude, y'all are all part of spiritual traditions that are, by and large, very much anti-patriarchal, very much anti-establishment. Yeah. And I said in that same essay, politics as we know it now is a form of idolatry. I said you are not a Democratic pagan. You are not a Republican pagan. You are a pagan who happens to be Republican.
Right.
You are a pagan who happens to be a Democrat. And I turned around and I put it in such a clear picture. The donkey or the elephant does not grace your sacred space in any way, shape, or form, but you will fight and argue as though it does.
Yeah. Yeah, I've joined a few of those Facebook groups, just both ends of the spectrum, just curiosity, just seeing how these communities run, just really to gather information for myself. And when 98% of the conversations are politics and spirituality never enters these spaces, it's like, okay, and then leave group.
I feel like I should have offered to foot your therapy bill for that. I'm so sorry.
Like, I'll get into them just curiosity's sake, and it's just okay.
Right.
I mean, I personally, and this might upset people, but I've joined racist groups I was curious. Hell, yeah. So if somebody's brand new to the path, where would you say for them to start? With a text, with a community?
I would first and foremost, books. That whole adage, we're the religion of homework, it's not bullshit.
No.
At all.
No.
Like, I basically break it down into 4 categories for books. If a new pagan can get their hands on 4 books, the first 4 books that should be the things to be absolutely purchased, it would be a copy of the Havamal, And I, for one, prefer simplistic language. When I teach, I believe simplistic language breeds easier comprehension.
Absolutely.
I think The Wanderer's Havamal by Jackson Crawford is arguably one of the best translations out there, if that's how you're looking to process it. I would also then turn around and say the Poetic Edda, also by Crawford. I'm not sponsored by him in any way. I would then say an archaeology book. Okay. I generally tend to lean a lot heavier into one or the other. Mm-hmm. And if you want to make it a list of 5, fuck it, make it a list of 5. Yeah. So it would be The Wanderer's Havamal, the Poetic Edda, The Children of Ash and Elm by Dr. Neil Price, or Myths and Symbols of Pagan Europe by H.R. Ellis Davidson. And then I would pick one book to jump headlong into the sagas. Now, I don't think, like, Erbigja Saga, which is so full of, like, the magic and the really, like, hardcore, scary shit in our sagas. Right. I wouldn't say Erbigja Saga is a great way to get your foot in the door.
Not
with
a beginner's book, that's for sure.
Because for me, the sagas have always been a good look at how life was back in the day, whether the characters named in the books are real or not.
It's a window into culture.
My ideal, like, if you're going to dip your toe in the pool, Njal Saga is going to be your first book.
Yeah, I think I put that in one of my lists on the website. I feel like that's a beginner's saga. You know, as far as, like, you know, beginner introduction to kind of get into the sagas and understand how these stories can relate to the spirituality aspect. You know, get your mindset into the culture so you can better understand the spiritual stuff. But
see, and the other thing that I would have to say, if you go in the audio direction, take it with a grain of salt. Not for the fact that the content is bad, but sometimes the people who are reading the books have no business reading the books. I had to get refunded from Audible because the iteration of the prose Edda I got, the person doing the reading sounded like Randy Marsh from South Park.
Interesting.
So I kept hearing Sharon, Gylfi did this, Sharon. Just like, oh dear God, I can't do this. And then I said, fuck it, I bought the book and read it cover to cover.
Absolutely. So, like, your books, you mentioned Crawford's translation, and I totally agree. That's probably the most accessible for common everyday language to understand. If somebody listening to this is looking for a more financially accessible version, I personally like Carolyn Larrington's translations. I feel she does a really good job of understanding the source material and translating it into a fairly understandable context for it. I don't know if you would agree on that, or...
Larrington was actually my second translation of the Poetic Edda, so I agree with you. I agree with you a lot, as well as the forward from Lindau in Larrington's Edda. I really enjoyed as well.
Absolutely, yeah. I always tend to default to Larrington's translations just because it's what's available online for free. People can just read it and have access to it in a very easily, accessible way. But if you're looking for something you can sit down as a modern person to read and understand the text, I think Crawford does an amazing job. I know some people have some issues with some of his translations, but I think it's just nitpicky stuff that people are having issues with. But overall, for the most part, he's definitely the most accessible to read. And I even, and other people have translated their versions of the Havamal. I did myself. It took me a year going through stanza by stanza and then, reading forward just to make sure that something I put back doesn't, go into that. But I went through each stanza, kind of translated it into my own words, and even put like a little understanding, just my own. And it kind of the project for that and the project for my other books that I've already published, was they came from my own notebooks. Like I bought the study Havamal, like a lot of other people do. That's got 3 translations plus the Old Norse in there, and I went through, and it's got like a little notes place, and I went through and wrote down, like, retranslated into my own words and wrote down my own understandings, and that's what I put into this other book. Just maybe, something I say, it's not an end all be all. I'm not saying, my version is the best, because I know it's not, but it's my own understandings, and
Exactly.
it might open, you know 5 stanzas out of there might, just open your eyes to another concept within that particular, that stanza, with that information that comes from it. And it might be those 5 stanzas are amazing and you like those out of mine and don't like anything else, and that's completely valid. But I think it's just, just helping people, like, get little bits of understanding on that. But I've got
Definitely.
4, yeah, 4 different Havamals here. I have the Wondrous Havamal on ebook, but I actually want to buy the physical copy so I can have it here as well.
Now, I would also say jump to books on the runes later on down your path.
Yeah, you need a
I,
foundation.
I happen to think the runes are quite secondary to education.
Hmm.
It's something you could pick up on the way,
The way,
but it's not gonna ruin your time as a heathen if you don't study the runes.
absolutely, the way I put it into one of my educational pieces on the temple was that, you have your primary stuff, that's your spirituality, and then your secondary stuff. That includes like runes, herbalism, whatever other, witchcraft. If you want to try to revive Scythe or Galdar or whatever you want to get into, those are secondary things. That's not even for the beginner's path. You shouldn't be diving into that stuff right away, because it just muddies up the waters, and it creates more confusion early on than it answers for you.
Exactly. I mean, for me, I would look at probably 2 to 3 books on the runes that prove to be rather comprehensive for me.
Hmm.
That would be the Runica Manuscripta by Dr. Rene Derrelez,
Yep.
which is a pain in the ass to find, but if you can find it, it's well worth the hunt. Runabok, A Journey Through the Runes by Eirikur Halfulferson, which happens to be a very, very good set of books. Very, very comprehensive. It's a fucking dense read, but it is so worth it.
I'm gonna have to add that to my library.
Hell yeah. And then I would also look at... Actually, no. It's just those 2. Derrelez and Ulferson, my 2... For me, what I look at is primarily the most comprehensive sources on the runes.
Absolutely. What's something you wish somebody would have told you when you first started out?
Fuck.
Like something that took you years to, like, to understand, like that little bit of wisdom that took you years to accomplish, that you wish that somebody could have just told you to start with. One being, don't study the runes until you've a little bit deeper into the path, but...
See, I think we honestly discussed it at the head of this thing. It's be patient. Because when you first have what you perceive to be as an interaction with the divine, it becomes an opiate you want to do nothing but chase. And if you don't get that opiate, you don't get that fix of divine interaction, it makes you not want to do this.
For sure. This is something I wanted to ask earlier, was another part of the conversation, but like we were talking about ritual and such, and like daily and weekly things, but like during the times of your life, say, you work in a restaurant, so there's seasons of life that are hella busy, and you might have other things going on in your life that take up so much of your time. How do you forge through that and find just a little tiny bit of space for your practice?
It also goes back to simple gestures. Mjolnir's around my neck, oath rings on my wrist.
Yeah.
But I'm a very, very firm believer of do what you can when you can. And I think the how do you make time for ritual conversation stems very deeply from people who have not fully unpacked a lot of their Abrahamic baggage. Like, for me, Judaism meant very little growing up. It meant, oh cool, I get presents for 8 days, and I can rub that in the face of my Christian friends.
Right.
That's literally all it meant for me and my aunt's brisket. That's it.
Dreidel.
But past that, it never meant much to me. Okay. So I never had this concept of, I feel like shit for not praying enough. I feel like shit for not doing enough. Admittedly, when I got that high of, oh shit, there's something is out there listening, and I wanted to chase it, the longer I put off chasing it, I felt bad.
Right.
But then, as I humbled myself and as I grew in my path more and more, it occurred to me that it took a nice hard look in the mirror like, dude, what am I doing? Live this, understand it, grow. This is what gave you truth. This is what gave you a sense of peace. Live with what it gave you and the rest will follow.
Absolutely. Great advice. So where can people find you in your community?
That is a very, very simple answer. You can find us on TikTok at The Common Hearth. You can find us on Facebook at The Common Hearth. We have a group chat separate from The Common Hearth because, unfortunately, Facebook's community settings are not particularly conducive to keeping everything in one place. But that's okay. We are currently working on releasing our Discord server, which should be going live on Friday.
Oh,
with
nice.
an opening celebration the following Monday.
Awesome.
You can also find me on all of your favorite podcast platforms. I'm literally everywhere at this point. Spotify, Apple, Audible, Amazon Music. I'm on iHeartRadio, for fuck's sake.
Yes, sir.
Under I Am Heathen, and so can you.
And we'll put links to all that in the show notes, descriptions, and such. And if you actually go to the Pagan Temple's, I guess, webpage on Buzzsprout, where we host our podcast, I actually have linked I Am Heathen as one of the preferred podcasts. So you're linked on there as well. So people can find through the Pagan Temple as well. And we'll have definitely put the links in the Pagan Temple Discord community to help people in our Norse channels, to help people find the Common Hearth if that's a fit that they find is for them. Yeah. Before we close,
I'm very open to it happening, my friend.
Absolutely. And before we close out today, is there anything that we didn't talk about today that you think, is part of that conversation that needs to be had, that people need to hear?
Okay.
Yeah,
one final thing, because I think this is a very interesting piece to discuss. Mm-hmm. As you go through the stories, and I've found that a lot of people choose not to follow Odin because they find him somehow selfish, they find him hubristic, they find him evil in certain contexts.
Yeah.
The greatest lesson Odin ever gave me personally was live your life to the fullest in open defiance of what the universe has thrown at you.
I like that.
I look at Odin as a man who knows he's going to die. I look at Odin as a man who knows that he's going to die, and he goes throughout his journey knowing full well it's going to happen.
Absolutely. Just like his practice of save, he did that knowing, like the cultural stigma behind a man practicing that. And you hear a lot in TikTok people, that's kind of a conversation that's been going on for a little while about that. But, he, like you say, he's a man that lives life to the fullest. He wants those experiences. He wants that wisdom, that knowledge, and I relate with that a lot. Like I'm willing to do most anything in the pursuit of knowledge and wisdom and just learning. Like I said, I joined the racist Facebook groups and the flat earthers and all that stuff. Just, you know, take it upon myself to expose myself to some crazy shit just for a little bit of understanding and a little bit of knowledge in those spaces. And I could relate with Odin on that aspect as well.
Absolutely.
And I love that take. It's very powerful. Take a breath. This has been a really, really great conversation, and I hope we can have more like this on different topics and different things. Maybe even partner with some of the educational stuff with the temple and kind of share information and resources and all that. We definitely need to build these partnerships, build this community, these family, even if, one community to the next, those connections. I think are amazing, because when you look into like even the Viking Age, individual communities had their own rituals, but they even still got together with other communities to have those experiences, and I think our different communities
Exactly.
could do this, could benefit a lot from those experiences.
I think we'll be having you on I Am Heathen next.
That'll be awesome. I definitely look forward to it.
It's gonna be fun.
And that's our conversation for this episode. If something you heard here today made you think, made you question, or made you want to learn more, that's exactly why we're here. You can find the show notes in the description. If you're not subscribed to the newsletter yet, that's the best way to stay connected. Join our community. Links will be in the show notes. And if this conversation was worth your time, share it with someone it would mean something to. That's how this community grows. I'm Matt. This has been a Pagan Perspective, having one conversation at a time.